Welcome to The Buzz. I'm Christopher Conover. This week, LGBTQ rights issues in Arizona politics. So far this year, the Arizona legislature has dealt with 11 bills covering the topics of LGBTQ rights. Governor Katie Hobbs vetoed 6 of those bills, including all of the proposals that dealt with drag shows, which were a popular target for the Republican-led legislature. Even as drag shows come under further political scrutiny, some students look to the performance art as a way of self-expression. Paula Rodriguez introduces us to one such young person.
In recent years, drag shows have come under fire in state legislatures across the United States, including Arizona.
Tennessee just became the first state this year to restrict drag performances. Republicans at the Arizona legislature want us to become the second.
GOP lawmakers in several states are proposing laws which would shield children from those shows. That now includes lawmakers in Arizona.
Mr. Chairman,
yes or no?
A heated meeting.
I will show you the absolute debauchery and evil that is behind this. We have to protect the children.
Republican lawmakers describing drag queen performances as evil and pornographic.
It's not R-rated, it's X-rated entertainment.
But for some, it is a lifeline.
If I have not done drag, then I don't know. I've never thought about that. I can't imagine a life without drag. It's crazy.
Adrienne Molina is a recent graduate from Tucson Magnet High School who first discovered drag just a few years ago.
In drag, my name is Megan Me Blush, and Megan was born because I saw drag queens on TV and on shows like RuPaul's Drag Race. And I just saw the makeup, the outfits, the hair, everything, and I was like, I want to replicate that.
Molina has always had a keen interest in makeup, first practicing in the comfort of his mom's home during the pandemic. But he quickly came to realize he needed to do more.
I need to go further with this. I need to take this makeup, bring it out into the world, but also complete it, from head to toe, bring the drag queen out.
After months of YouTube tutorials about how to glue down eyebrows and learning how to create eccentric looks, Megan Me Blush made her first drag debut as Morticia Adams for Molina's high school homecoming dance. From then on, his hobby turned into a passion, as Adrienne's mom, Teresa Reyes, would say.
He'll come home and he'll be like, Mama, I want this to look like this, and I want it to be like this. We'll sit there and we'll try outfits on together, and it's like playing dress up.
Molina has always had a need to explore and be creative. From a young age, Reyes knew Molina had different interests than what his brothers had.
I remember taking him to the store the very first time that he wanted to buy a Barbie. He put the Barbies on the conveyor belt, and the cashier was like, oh, that's really nice. Are you buying Barbies for your sister? And he just looked at me, and I remember the look on his face. It was just sheer shock. He didn't know what to say, and he was just and I just looked at him and I told him, just tell her, it's okay. You tell her. And if and he said, no, these are for me.
Despite trying to put him into sports like football, there was no stopping Molina from wanting to take his own path.
He was in his full head-to-toe football gear, the pads, the helmet, everything. And the coach wasn't putting him in the game. His brother's playing, but he's not playing. And I went and I talked to the coach, and I was like, look, man, why aren't you putting my son in the game? And he was like, he doesn't want to play, and we can't make him play if he doesn't want to. And I turned over, and Adrian was standing right on where the edge of the players were, and he was facing the cheerleaders. And in just his whole football uniform, he was just cheering along with them. And I remember I was just like, this kid has no business in this place. This is not him. It's not him.
Supporting Molina was never a question for Reyes. She would do anything to see Molina achieve his dreams and follow his passions.
I'm his mom. It's my job to support him in the best way that I can. And so if that means picking out bras, showing him how to use the bra, if it means, showing him how to put on his tights without ripping, and or going backstage at his drag shows and trying to help him change out of his shoes, lugging the stuff around, try to be his camera person at his shows whenever I can, so that way he can build his portfolio. I mean, it's a bonding experience. It's something that me and him can share together. Those are memories that we have, and I just view it the same way as I would support any of my other kids.
Reyes, as a single mom, would be there for every moment, from practice to performance. Even when Tucson Magnet High School held its first annual drag show last year. For Molina, that will be a moment he will never forget, because it meant something more than just a performance.
We get to show that queer people are there. We need our community just as much as the football team gets to put on their show, their game. We need to be able to do the same thing. We need to be able to have a space and a time for us to just let loose and show all of our queerness.
With seats filled to the brim and standing room only, the legacy of Tucson's drag show continued into this year. But that did not come without pushback. Community members took to school board meetings calling drag performances not school appropriate and asking the board to stop the event from happening. But that only motivated drag queens who were past and present students to speak up and share their truth, including Molina.
You should understand that this is exactly what saved my life. Do you understand? Drag saved my life. What do you suppose I could have done with my life other than this? This is my art. This is my world. This is everything to me.
It is not about the event. It is not drag. There is so much transphobia and homophobia in this community and in this country. And it's not about the kids, because we are the kids. We started this club to have a safe space to be able to learn and grow about our history and our community together. And we plan the drag shows as a way to express ourselves through art.
It is beautiful, it is creative, it is fun. It's an art form, it's a form of expression like band, like regular art, like choir, like dance. It's no different from that, really. It has allowed me personally to express parts of myself that I have never been able to express. It has made me explore myself and grow more as a person.
The show still took place with supporters coming from all over Tucson to see the performances. But for Molina, that moment where queer students needed to defend their space was just a symptom of the ongoing attack on drag.
It's more than what it looks like. It's not just a ban on drag. It's a ban on a whole community, a whole existence of a being.
This year alone, there have been 11 bills in the Arizona legislature that target LGBTQ rights, including some that would restrict drag shows. While it is expected that Governor Katie Hobbs vetoes each, the anti-drag movement has continued to make its way into state and local governments, as it has each year. But Molina says that what gets lost is how drag can serve as a learning space for someone who is unsure of their gender expression or identity, like himself. Molina always knew he was queer from a young age, but he never felt confident enough to go out in public in the way he wanted to. That was until Megan came around.
It helps me realize I can be confident out of drag. It helped me realize I feel better about going out with makeup on that's not drag makeup, like boy makeup, and dressing and using different articles of clothing that doesn't really align with the sign sex at birth.
Molina argues that Megan changed his life for the better, but the reality of today's climate creates concern for Molina's mom, Reyes.
It's not that it's because they're trying to protect the kids, but my son's a kid. I mean, what does that mean for him?
However, Reyes recognizes the impact her son is leaving behind through actions like helping organize the school's first drag show.
He's leaving his legacy there, and he'll forever be known as Tucson High's drag queen, which makes me sad because there's queens before him, and we know the queens that were there before him, but there wasn't a space for them to be able to express themselves, and there's so much that we've missed out on, and so many beautiful performances, and so many beautiful personalities that we could have gotten to know had they been able to have the opportunity to express themselves. And so the fact that Adrian can recognize all of that and says, no, no more. I'm going to make sure that this happens.
This reality and stories they've heard from other drag queens solidify the importance of acceptance to Reyes.
I always turn to him and I'm always like, I just want you to know that you're loved. You are loved, you are accepted, like you are you, and I will always love you and accept you, and you will always have like love and support. My heart breaks for the ones that don't. Like the families that can't get themselves to that place to just be okay with accepting their kids for who they are. Because I think like it would probably be a really different world if they could.
Growing academic research has found that gender identity and expression fall on a spectrum. In the eyes of Melina's mom, drag allows for people to explore new parts of themselves in a mostly binary world.
Drag queens allow us to get out of the boxes. You know, there's all these boxes of identity and all these boxes about how our genders are and what roles we fit with each gender and how each gender should be. Drag queens break through all of that, and they teach us that it doesn't have to be that way and that you can be this or you can be that or you can be everything that you want to be.
Now that Melina has graduated high school, his next plan is to go to school to study fashion design with the hope to do drag as a profession and maybe one day compete on RuPaul's Drag Race. But for now, he has one piece of advice for those curious about drag.
Push yourself into the community because it's a pretty fun one.
For The Buzz, I'm Paola Rodriguez.
You're listening to The Buzz. I'm Christopher Conover. We're looking at gender issues in politics this week. Arizona is no stranger to the debates around the treatment of those who do not conform to gender norms. During this year's legislative session, Governor Katie Hobbs vetoed a number of bills that would have impacted sex education in schools, gender-affirming health care for young people, preferred pronouns, and a variety of other issues. Dr. Laura Brown is a political scientist and author of Jockeying for the American Presidency, among other books. I started our conversation at the national level by asking about rhetoric from Republicans, particularly Florida Governor and presidential candidate Ron DeSantis.
Well, I don't think that these efforts to be culturally combative and be going after those who are, according to them, woke or engaged in pushing the boundaries of progressive politics will play well among the general electorate. It will, of course, have resonance within the evangelical community, within the ardently sort of Catholic community, and I think within the broader Republican primary electorate that sees themselves as culturally conservative and against a more inclusive American society.
So you say it won't play well with the general electorate, which, as you pointed out, means it could play well in the primary election, but whomever gets the Republican nomination, can they pivot towards the middle for the general, or is this one of those issues, once you've staked your claim, you have to stay there?
Well, I think that Republicans believe that it will be fine for them in the general election because it will encourage turnout among their base. So I think they believe that even if they are being combative or exclusionary or even bigoted, that will not pose problems for them in terms of their base. And I don't think that they have yet really weighed what it means for independents in the suburbs who are more educated and are really offended by these kinds of messages. But this is where they are. The Republicans have left their more libertarian positions, which used to kind of govern a lot of these cultural issues. And they've really staked a claim in standing for, what they see as traditional values, traditional families, and against the sexualization and the I think, what they think of as the predatory behavior of the LGBT community.
You and I were talking before we were recording about the influence of the U.S. Supreme Court on all of this. 8 years ago, they ruled that gay marriage is allowable. This year, they allowed a web company to refuse to make websites for those gay marriages. So how does the Supreme Court play into all of this that moves into the political arena and potentially who becomes the next president of the United States?
Well, I think so much of the current politics within the Republican Party were really instigated by Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas's concurring opinion in the Dobbs case that was related to abortion. If you recall, in that concurring opinion, he argued that now that Roe versus Wade had been overturned, that ruling should also cast doubt on precedents that were not necessarily related to abortion. So he actually suggested that contraception, gay marriage, and essentially really those rights that are about individual privacy should be reconsidered and thought about differently. And I think what's so important about that opinion was it sent a signal to conservative activists in the states all across the country that wanted to try to chip away at those rights for individuals within the LGBTQ community and chip away at those rights for women with respect to even more onerous abortion restrictions, to really give them permission to start an incrementalist and cumulative effort that might eventually reach the Supreme Court. So, just when you're thinking about this, it's so important to understand how the justices on the Supreme Court are setting the tone for the conservative activists to challenge those rights, which have now, or at least for the last decade or so, been settled law.
And not even through the majority opinion, through a concurring opinion, which carries legally a different weight. But as you said, Justice Thomas kind of set out the steps in that concurring opinion, which a lot of people don't read.
That's exactly right. And now what you have, and so I think when you look at that opinion, and then you also analyze the QAnon sort of conspiracy theories about pedophilia and the over-sexualization and grooming of children that has animated so much of the MAGA base, there is a reality that Republicans have now found kind of their new set of agenda items to go after individuals in this country.
It sounds like even though the candidates for president are interviewing, if you will, for the job of leading the country, when it comes to issues like this, they're not leading, they're following. They may be following, in this case, the concurring opinion from Justice Thomas, maybe what's going on in state legislatures, but they're not out being opinion leaders on this, or am I reading that wrong?
Well, I would argue that no presidential aspirant is ever much of a leader. They are individuals who perceive the currents that are animating the political environment And those who kind of get out ahead and are able to ride the opinion wave are usually those ones who are the most successful. So it is true that when we look back to, say, 2004, you saw Karl Rove and George W. Bush and the Republicans really make a concerted effort to put initiatives on various different ballots to restrict marriage to that which is a union between a man and a woman. And that actually helped them drive turnout in some of the more contested states. And they are trying to drive turnout among the most religious and evangelical base that really makes up the Republican Party.
You talk about the wave of popularity and opinions and things like that, but Gallup came out with some results of a poll in June of this year that showed 71% of Americans support gay marriage, and that number has been steadily climbing since the late 90s. So how does that balance with what we see Republican presidential candidates and gubernatorial candidates and all the way down the line pushing in their campaigns as we come into the never-ending 24 campaign cycle?
Well, in fact, that Gallup survey that actually came out in June showed that acceptance of same-sex relations fell this year down to 64% from 71% in 2022. And it's also true that the decline was mostly among Republicans. In fact, it fell by 15 percentage points. And now only 41% of Republicans currently, are in favor or accept same-sex relations. So I think one of the things that is important is that Republicans have recently really kind of animated their religious base around anti-LGBTQ initiatives. They have spent time focused on, activities related to pedophilia and grooming, and they are banning books that they say are over-sexualizing young people. We saw Ron DeSantis come out against Disney as a corporation, which is stunning given the amount of money Disney brings to the state of Florida. And yet he wanted to make an example of this. We've also seen Republicans go after the flying of pride flags, and state legislatures have now banned those flags from being flown near government facilities. So I think what is so important is to realize that over the last year, there has been this kind of renewed effort in focusing on anti-LGBTQ rights and initiatives, right, to make sure that their evangelical base stays committed to the Republican Party.
It seems like in politics, especially presidential campaigns, there's often a common bad guy. We've seen other countries have that role. We've seen people of color have that role. We've seen the LGBT community have that role in the past. They're now back up at the top for the moment. What is it about this othering that allows for an ebb and flow? As you pointed out, Justice Thomas' concurring opinion kind of pushed up the LGBTQ community to the top of that bad guy other role right now. But over time, why does this ebb and flow? But at the same time, it seems like the same groups just vying for the top, if you will.
Well, I think one of the things that's important to realize is that campaigns are about division. And there is a reality that political parties and candidates will often seek to divide the electorate and to divide the electorate in such a way so that the majority is on their side. The problem for Republicans with this is that that division only works within the Republican base and electorate itself. It doesn't work within the larger electorate. And this is where those Gallup numbers are problematic for Republicans in the long term. But they are seeking to divide the Republican Party and to divide it in a way so that a majority is with one candidate. At least that is what Ron DeSantis is trying to do. He is trying to kind of out conservative Donald Trump so that he can get the most active, engaged voters within the Republican Party to vote for him. But the problem is that will make him very alienated from the general electorate.
Sounds like 2024 is going to be an interesting ride for the presidential campaigns, for those of us who watch and for all of us who vote.
Yeah, I mean, and the basic problem is that the lower other pressing issues fall on the national agenda, whether it's the economy or crime or immigration, then the opposition has to find something. And what the Republicans appear to have found over the last couple of years is really abortion rights and gay rights.
That was political scientist Dr. Laura Brown. And that's the buzz for this week. Tune in next week as we continue our trip up the Copper Corridor with a stop in Globe, Arizona. You can find all our episodes online at azpm.org and subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcast. Just search for The Buzz Arizona. We're also on the NPR app. Zach Ziegler is our producer with production help from Paula Rodriguez and Desiree Tucker. Our music is by Enter the Haggis. I'm Christopher Conover. Thanks for listening.
Arizona Public Media's original programming is made possible in part by the Community Service Grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.